So with Summer 24 comes loads of flow enhancements. This you probably already knew. One of the new enhancements that we're getting is the action button for screen flows. Now, this is something I've really been looking forward to because I've always wanted to be able to add a custom button to my screen flow. In fact, in the project that I'm working on right now with my client, they've asked me multiple times whether or not we can add custom buttons to screen flows. And unfortunately, I had to say, no, we cannot. Not much we can do about it. It's just not a feature that's available. But now with action buttons available in the pre-release org, we're finally able to test out that functionality, see what it can do, and then hopefully this becomes GA very, very soon. The issue is, though, I have no idea how to use these action buttons. I've searched online for some documentation. I couldn't find any. Granted, this is only available in a pre-release org for Summer 24, so it's still a bit early. I looked at the Trailhead community group for the action button feature. There are no posts yet, except for the one that I made the other day. So this is still very new. There is not a lot of information out there. What I have found, though, is that there are some developers who have access to Summer 24 pre-release orgs. They've gone in and they have managed to make the action button work quite easily. I don't know if it's because in their developer brains, things just kind of click. It could be. In my brain, however, things did not click. I was playing with this for ages and I just could not get it to work. And so what I thought would be helpful is for me to put together a video of everything that I've found out so far about the action buttons, so that if you are in a position similar to me, if you have tried to play around with this and you just can't make it work, or if you're not planning on playing around with it at all, but you're just curious as to how this would work, then maybe you find this video helpful. I did manage to get it working in the end. Some bits I'm still trying to figure out how it worked. I know it worked. I'm still trying to figure out how I did it or how I made it work or what's the logic behind it working this way. And other bits, I think it's starting to make sense. But it's what it is. It's one of those things that just happens when new feature comes out. I think this is also a good opportunity to point out, if you're an admin, if you're a consultant, if you're a developer, it doesn't matter if you're in the ecosystem and you're someone who generally gets overwhelmed whenever new updates come out because there's a lot of new features in one go, and now suddenly perhaps you feel like you were just about getting the hang of flows, and now there's Summer 24 with a bunch of flow enhancement features, and you're thinking, God, now it's going to take me ages to catch up again. You're not alone. I actually feel the same way. I know how to build flows. I think I'm quite good at building flows anyway. I'm definitely not the best out there by far, but I can make flows and I think I'm pretty good at it. I've made some really interesting flows in the past, but I always feel overwhelmed. I always feel like, oh man, like I should probably learn how to do this really quickly, because as soon as it becomes available, if I need to do this, I should know how to do this. And so that's why I'm doing this. So hopefully you find this video helpful and it gives you a little bit of clarity on how this works. And if you know something I don't, then please share that in the comments below, because I would love to learn more about this. So without further ado, let's jump right in. I'm going to show you how the flow is currently working, and then I'm going to take you through the flows itself. There are 3 flows actually. I'm going to take you through them individually, explain how they work as best as I can, and then we'll leave it for the comments for you guys to tell me what you think. So here we are in Salesforce, and we are looking at an account record. This is a person account, and we have our screen flow here on the right-hand side. And so this is essentially just a display text. And then we have the action button called Search Opportunities. Now, the display text is pretty obvious. It's just a display text on your screen flow, and it's just kind of guiding the end user in terms of what to do here. So then we have the actual button itself. And what I want to show you before I start using this flow is on the left-hand side on my actual related tab here of my accounts, you can see that this person account has two opportunities, sample opportunity 1, sample opportunity 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the search opportunity buttons to search for all the opportunities related to this account. And that's going to return that value to us in a data table. So this component here is a data table. It's your normal data table. And we're just using this to be able to display the results that our action button has fetched. I think there are other ways to do this. I'm pretty sure you can use radio buttons as well. I have no idea how to make that work. I tried, I couldn't. I think data table is a little bit easier just because I guess I worked more with data tables in the past anyway. So I was able to make it work. I definitely want to keep trying with the radio buttons and maybe any other component that perhaps could show you results from your action button. But for now, it's a data table. So it being a data table, it works exactly the same way as any other data table. So if you've ever used the data table component before in a ScreenFlow, this is exactly the same thing. Essentially, our action button just fetched the results for our data table. And now what we can do is we can select one of the opportunities. So I'm going to select this sample opportunity 2. And then what happens is we get another display text message below that and another action button. And so this action button is now going to take the opportunity that we selected on our data table, sample opportunity 2, and it's going to create a quote record against this opportunity. Now you might be thinking, why in the hell are you creating a quote like this? Trust me, I don't even know. The reason why I put this together is because I think every example that I've seen so far is to do with accounts, opportunities, and cases. And I thought I want to do something a bit different so that hopefully it helps with understanding of what the actual button can do. So when we click create quote, the flow is going to trigger, and our auto launch flow, by the way, is going to trigger, and it's going to hard code create a quote for us with a title and some other data. But it's all hard coded in the flow right now. Ideally, obviously, you want all this to be dynamic if you're doing something like this in real life, but this is just a sample to actually see the functionality of the action button. So I'm going to go ahead and click create quote. Now, when that happens, I am using another display text just to show the user, okay, we have successfully created that quote record. Now, ideally here, what you could also do is you could use a template, text template, and add a hyperlink to that record so that users can click on it and be taken to that record. Or there's loads of other things you can do here, but essentially I try to keep it simple just to show the functionality of the action button. So now what the end user would probably do, I guess, is hit finish so that they can go back to the beginning of the flow. So if we look at sample opportunity 2 and we scroll down, we can see that we have a quote here, new quote created from ScreenFlow. So this is the quote that we essentially created using our action button. And if we look at details, we can see that it's being related to the opportunity that we've selected, and it's also linked to the same account that we've launched. So that's how the flow works at the moment. Now let me take you through the individual flows. So the first thing I'm doing is I have an auto launch flow that is going to get the opportunities related to the account. So one thing to keep in mind is that with the actual button component, you can actually use auto launch flows alongside of that. That's essentially how the component works. The button takes you to an auto launch flow that will then do something else. And then whatever it does in that flow can then be displayed in something like a data table. So in this flow, it's an auto launch flow. It's extremely simple. All we're doing is we're getting opportunities. So here is the object opportunity. Now we're getting opportunities where the account ID of the opportunity equals the account ID variable. This is just a variable that I created. Generally, you would call this record ID. If you're familiar with making flows, you would call this record ID. I call this account ID. There is a reason for that, and that's because I have a record ID variable in my actual ScreenFlow, and I didn't want to get them confused. I wanted to actually be able to see which one is coming from where. So this one is an account ID. I'll show you this variable here. This is just a variable that is available for input. Now, this input and output is super important on your auto launch flows. So I'm going to explain this in a little bit more detail, because if you're trying to make screen flows with the action button and you're not seeing the variables, this is probably why you forgot to tick available for input or available for output. So let's just keep that on the back of our heads for now. We're going to circle back to this. So we're getting all the opportunities where the account equals the account ID variable. And then if we scroll down, this is really important. We're storing the results that this element has found into a collection called collection ops. And I'm going to show you that. It's a record collection. It is a data type of record for the opportunity object, and it is available for output. So remember that this one is available for output. And then below that, we're just selecting some opportunity fields to store within that variable, like the amount, stage, and name. That's all that we're doing here. Now, if we go to our screen flow, this is super simple in terms of flow complexity, I guess. It's one element. That's what I mean. So this is our main screen. Now, this at the very top, we're going to start with just the display text. That's as easy as that. Then we have our action button. Now, in the action button, our action is the opportunity auto launch flow that I've just showed you. So if we click here, you can see that we have two options. We have set input values and view output resources. Now, set input values, you're only going to see something here if your auto launch flow is using a variable where the input checkbox is ticked. If it's not ticked, you're not going to see anything here. So if you're trying to follow along and you're not seeing anything here, you need to go back to your auto launch flow. You need to find your account ID variable and you need to tick available for input. And then once you save and activate this auto launch flow, then go back to your screen flow, refresh, and then you're going to see this here. Your auto launch flow needs to be activated, by the way. Otherwise, none of this will work and you're not even going to be able to find your flow in the action here, which is a bit of a, if you go back to our auto launch flow, you can see that actually this is only one version. So I think I redid this, but trust me, there were a lot of saved versions that I had to go through when I was testing. Anyway, this is your input, and then available for output, you can see that it tells you what it is. So by default, you have these two. You have the flow interview status, and then you have the flow interview GUID. I have no idea what that stands for, but you have that there. I'm not lying, by the way. Like, if you think I know everything, I really don't. I'm learning this as I go. So if you know something, let me know. But what I do know is that we can now see our collection here, and this is going to be important. So this is why on our auto launch flow, we've added this record collection here and we mark that as available for output because we want that available over here because we're going to use that shortly, and I'll show you. So this is essentially what we're doing. For our input value, this is essentially asking us, you have an auto launch flow where you want me to get opportunities that are related to an account, and the ID of this account is stored in this account ID variable. So now the flow is saying, where is this ID value coming from? It's an account ID variable, but what's the ID of the account? And so we're giving the auto launch flow that ID through a record ID. Now, this record ID is yet another variable, and this is why I think I got so confused. This is another variable. This variable exists in my screen flow. It's called record ID. It is available for input. And so even though we have this variable and we're saying to the action over here, we're saying you want the account ID value, we're giving it to you. It's a record ID variable. It's still not a value. It's just an empty variable at the moment. And so you must be asking, well, where is the value going to come from? Good question. The value is coming from our Lightning record page. So because we've embedded this flow onto the page, if I edit our Lightning record page, then I'm going to show you the flow component that we've put on our Lightning record page. And then in here, it says record ID on the right-hand side. And then we need to take pass record ID into this variable. So this passes the record ID value into our record ID variable. And then our screen flow passes our record ID variable into the account ID variable, which our auto launch flow uses to find the right account to then get opportunities for. Whew. Wow. It's no wonder I was confused before. Maybe there is an easier way to do this. I couldn't get it to work. This is the only way I managed to get it to work. So please, if I don't need to do all of this, if there is somehow a shortcut, then please let me know, because at the moment, this is the only way that I can see in my head of this working. Anyway, so now search opportunities action button is essentially configured with giving it everything that it needs. The next thing that we need to do is we need to have a data table so that we can display the records that our auto launch flow has found. And so this is a normal data table, but for source collection, what we're actually doing here is we're referencing the flow itself. This is really interesting. Through the action button, we can get into the auto launch flow, which is a completely separate flow. And then in there is a tab called results, and then we find that collection. Let me show you what I mean. In here, we can get that screen action, which is from our action button, by the way. This is what our auto launch flow is called, opportunity auto launch get ops. So I click here. Within that, there is an option called results, which is essentially the results that the button has found you, the results for your auto launch flow. And then within there, I can access the collection ops, which, if you remember, I'm going back and forth here because I really want to make this clear. If you remember, this is where we're storing all of the opportunities that we found from our auto launch flow. So we're displaying that here. And then the next thing you need to do is you need to add columns, because it's a data table. If you don't add columns, even if there are results, I'm pretty sure that it's not going to show you anything because there are no columns. So add some columns in there, save yourself the trouble. Now I do have a component visibility filter here, essentially because I only want to show this when the person uses the action button. And you can do that. You can just reference your opportunity flow again. And within that, there is an option that says is success. And if that equals true, then show me the data table. Essentially, if you use the button and you found something, show me the data table. If you use the button and you haven't found anything, don't show me the data table, because why would you show me an empty data table? So there are some operators that are super helpful here. So anyway, after that, we have another display text. And again, we have a visibility here. This visibility is essentially saying, did you select anything in the data table? Because if you haven't selected anything, then I don't want to be seen. And so we can do that by referencing our data table, our first selected row, and then we're essentially using does not equal empty string. Empty string is really useful here. Now, after that, we have another action button. Now, before we go through this action button, what I've done, and this might be wrong, but it's working, and I try to keep it as simple as possible. I've actually created another auto launch flow. Now, I don't know if you can do it with just one flow, one auto launch flow, if you can actually do that for both of the action buttons. I made a separate one. We'll see. Anyway, this is my second auto launch flow. This is essentially now, instead of getting something, it's creating something. That's why I want to put it in a different flow. So essentially what we're doing here is we're creating a quote. So here is our quote object. This is new, by the way. You can now select whether you want to, how to set the record field values. I chose manually here. I'm going to do a little video about these smaller enhancements in the flow builder later. So if you don't know anything about this, this is really cool, but I can show you that later. Essentially, we're just creating a quote record here. And what we're doing is for name, I've hard-coded that in, but then for opportunity, I'm looking at an opportunity ID. And the reason for this, because obviously I want to test this feature as well. So within the second auto launch flow, I have an opportunity ID variable This is a text variable, by the way. It is available for input and output, okay? Now, if we go back to our screen flow, this is what the action button looks like. And for set input values, I essentially am in the same position as before. The auto launch flow has a variable, which is the opportunity ID. It's currently empty. This screen flow is responsible for giving that variable a value. Otherwise, it's just going to be empty. And the value, the opportunity ID value, is coming from the data table. Because the data table is displaying opportunities, whatever record the user selected on the data table is an opportunity record, and therefore it has an ID. And I am selecting the data table's first selected row opportunity record ID, and I'm pushing that value onto our opportunity variable for our second auto launch flow. So that's how that is getting the actual value that it needs to be able to create that relationship between the quote and the opportunity record. And so back to our screen flow, I just have a final display text just to say, quote successfully created. And again, I have a component visibility filter here that it's essentially checking this action button now, the create quote record action button, whether that is success equals true. In other words, whether we've clicked on it and it created a record and then display this successful message. Now, ideally, obviously, to improve user experience and everything else, I would make tons of changes to this. But the whole idea here is that we keep things simple just so that we can practice using this new flow enhancement. I do think it's really, really powerful. It is a bit confusing. I have no doubt that there is a way easier way to do what I've just done. But given that I couldn't find any official Salesforce documentations on this, I couldn't really find a lot of guides on this. I think it's still very new. I had to kind of try and do it myself. By no means, I think I'm in a position where I can just sit down with a brand new feature like this and just know exactly what I'm doing in 5 minutes. I do applaud if you can do that. And so I do ask for your help. Drop a comment down below if you've watched this video and there is something that you've seen that you know that I'm doing wrong or that you know that I could do better. Do please let me know. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. Until next time.